Hey team, so as I said in class on Tuesday, I believe it was, we're kind of finishing up cells and organelles and cell structure and function, and we're moving into studying photosynthesis. And last night you learned about some different ways that cells store or metabolize energy, all these different forms of energy in the cell and their different uses. And today we're going to be talking about, and that's kind of the run-up to photosynthesis and cellular respiration, because these are the two fundamental reactions that power most living systems on Earth, the vast majority. So photosynthesis, it is the act of taking light from the sun and then using it to fix carbon dioxide molecules together. And also uses water, and then it produces sugar, glucose, and oxygen. And photosynthesis takes place in lots of different types of organisms, but we're going to be focusing on the photosynthesis that happens in leaves. And we're going to be looking at some leaves underneath the microscope over the course of the next few days. So we're going to start out talking about a leaf cross-section. Well, what does a cross-section mean? Imagine you have a leaf, just your standard everyday leaf, and you cut it in half. So you take a razor blade and you slice. And then you take this part of the leaf and you just get rid of it, discard it. And you take the base of the leaf and you're going to rotate it. So right now it's kind of flat on the page, but I'm going to rotate it. So imagine that this front edge of the leaf was kind of sticking out of the screen at you. So you're going to spin it 90 degrees. And then you're also going to spin it in this direction and 90 degrees. And so that would mean the cut that we just made would kind of face us looking out of the screen. So if you imagine our leaf right here, I've just drawn a schematic of our leaf. Here we've got the stem and the veins. Here's the top of the leaf and here's the bottom of the leaf. And looking right here would be looking at the leaf cross-section. And believe it or not, there are multiple layers to I'm going to say all leaves. Maybe that's not true. Maybe there are some leaves that are just one layer, but most leaves have multiple layers, and that's what this screencast is about, the layers that make up a leaf. Okay, so this box right here is a zoom in on all of the different layers that are inside of this leaf. So this is our leaf cross-section right here that we're going to label, and then we're going to be looking at this today or in class on Friday. Okay, so to start off, all leaves have a waxy cuticle, and it's more pronounced on some leaves compared to others. So some leaves, when you pick them up and you kind of feel the top of them, they feel like they've got a layer of wax on top, and indeed they do. This layer is protective, and it presents some damage to the leaf. But it also prevents water loss because, as you know, wax is a lipid, it is hydrophobic, and it prevents water from escaping through the surface of the leaf. So here's our top layer. It's a waxy cuticle. It's not a layer of cells. The cells that produce and secrete the waxy cuticle lie just beneath it, and they are called the upper epidermis. You have a epidermis that is the outer layer of skin, and then underneath you have a dermal layer, the dermis. The dermis is producing the epidermis. And just like you, plants also have an upper epidermis. This helps protect, it's kind of like a skin for the leaf, and it produces the waxy cuticle. Just underneath the upper epidermis is a layer of leaves. They sometimes it's 2 layers, but they have these kind of thin, kind of column shape to them, and they're packed really tightly in next to one another. And this is called the palisade mesophyll. I should say to you right now that I'm just writing down these names, but I'm also giving you descriptions of what each of these does, and you should be writing down the functions of each layer as well as just the name. So the upper epidermis is secreting the waxy cuticle, and the waxy cuticle is this protective layer that's preventing damage, but also most importantly, preventing water loss. The palisade mesophyll is called the primary site of photosynthesis within a leaf. All of these tiny little green dots that I've drawn in here, these are all chloroplasts. Remember, chloroplasts are the organelles that do photosynthesis, and you're going to learn more about the structure of a chloroplast in the next screencast. So because there's tons of photosynthesis happening in the palisade mesophyll, there are lots of chloroplasts, the organelle that's performing that reaction. Now, what was I going to say? Oh, I've also drawn in some black circles here. You might think these are nuclei, but they're actually not. They're a vacuole. With a special name, it's actually called an amyloplast. It stores starch. So because there's so much photosynthetic activity happening in these cells, they also have these vacuoles that store the sugars that is being produced in this reaction in their cells. You need a special stain in order to see this, so you probably won't see the vacuoles in the cells that we look at, but hopefully you'll see some of the chloroplasts in the palisade mesophylls. Okay, so the palisade mesophyll, the primary site of photosynthesis. The next layer is called the spongy mesophyll. And the spongy mesophyll is the secondary site of photosynthesis. You can see I've labeled here there's a chloroplast, or there are chloroplasts in these cells. They're all the little green dots. There are also amyloplasts, or these vacuoles that are storing starch. But there is also lots of space in between the cells of the spongy mesophyll because the plant is doing gas exchange. There are some gases that are going out of the cell and some gases that are coming into the cell that are necessary to either have or to expel in order for photosynthesis to run. Okay, so I guess we should talk about those gases now. Plants need to breathe, just like you need to breathe, except they're kind of doing it in the opposite direction. So there are these specialized structures at the base of the cells, the bottom of the leaf, I should say, that are called stoma. That's singular. Plural would be stomata. The stoma is this entire circle right here. It's this gap that is letting gases come into or out of the leaf. Now the stoma is made up of two guard cells. The guard cells, they can either kind of be plasmolized and open and allow gas exchange to take place, or they can swell up, and when they swell up, they close this little gap and they prevent gas exchange from taking place. So the stomata at the base of the leaf control whether or not gas exchange is taking place between the leaf and the outside environment. In order for cells, for these plant cells, these chloroplasts within the palisade and spongy mesophyll to do photosynthesis, they need CO2. So when the stoma is open, CO2 can flow in. It flows into the leaf space because it's always being consumed whenever photosynthesis is happening. So the concentration of CO2 outside of the leaf compared to inside is lower. So it moves via this passive flow into the leaf. Because oxygen is always being produced, I don't have a purple one. Because oxygen is being produced through the process of photosynthesis, it moves out of the leaf when the stomata are open. And then this last blue line represents water. And water actually comes into the leaf not via the stoma, but instead from the roots through this structure here that we're going to talk about in just a second. Whenever the stomata are open, CO2 is moving in, O2 is moving out, and this is great for the plant. They really like this because they want CO2 in and O2 out. However, they also lose water, which is bad for the plant because this dehydrates them. So we're going to talk in the next few weeks about how plants that live in really arid environments, desert plants, have adapted so that they can keep doing photosynthesis, which they need a consistent supply of CO2 to do, but they don't want to lose water, so they have to close their stomata. Okay, so CO2 is moving in, O2 is moving out. These are both, the plant wants this to happen, but it doesn't want water to flow out, but that's happening regardless. So how does water actually get into the leaf? Well, you all know it's via the roots. And you probably are familiar with the veins that run through leaves. Well, these veins are actually connected to through the leaf, through the stem, all the way down to the roots through a structure called the vascular bundle. The vascular bundle is it's the bundle that is holding all of the, I guess you can think of it kind of similar to our arteries and veins, but the arteries and veins of a plant. So the brown cells around the outside are called the bundle sheath cells. And they're just like the walls of the plant vascular system. And there are two types of cells within the bundle sheath cells. The first is called the xylem. The xylem is the structure. It's these tiny little tubes, and it's really, really, really small. And it is the structure that's responsible for bringing water from the roots up to the leaves. So you can see here I've labeled this H2O, and so the water is going to move up via capillary action, so against the flow of, or the pull of gravity, but without any input of energy required by the plant, which is pretty amazing. Plants can move thousands of gallons of water against gravity via capillary action every day. And then the water, once it reaches the plant, is going to turn into water vapor, a gas in the space of the leaf. I guess I should have said the spongy mesophyll is called the spongy mesophyll because there are spaces between it, like a sponge, and this is where all the gases that are coming into or out of the leaf or from the xylem are just hanging out. Okay, and then the last structure within the vascular bundle is called the phloem. And the phloem is responsible for taking the sugars that are produced in photosynthesis and dissolving them in water, and then transporting that sugar water to all the other areas of the cell or of the plant that are not doing photosynthesis. So for example, photosynthesis is not happening in the roots, but the roots still need to live. So sugar water is brought to them, and that is how they're going to build their own bodies and get energy. Okay, So the last little piece of the cross section is the very bottom of the leaf. We have a lower epidermis. And this lower epidermis is just like the upper epidermis. It also creates or secretes a waxy cuticle. But unlike the upper epidermis, it has these gaps in it, which are the guard cells and the stoma, or the stomata, if we're talking about multiple of them. So the primary difference between the upper epidermis and the lower epidermis is that the lower epidermis, you're going to find these stomata. Okay, so in class tomorrow, you're going to be looking at some lilac leaf cross sections and trying to identify all the different layers. Should be pretty fun. Okay, that's all.